I don't know if I chose the best or worst possible time to make a video on this show, but I'm making a video on it right now nonetheless. I originally wanted to save covering this show for a future search for the worst cartoon that I had planned, an absolutely monumental episode. However, in light of recent events, I am, against my will, going to have to look at this show solo, on its own. That monumental search for the worst cartoon will still happen at some point in the future, but this isn't going to be part of it. In light of recent events, I think it would be best that I look at this show while we're still in the calm before the storm, before everything goes to next year. As the art style might suggest, Mr. Birchum is a Family Guy clone. Surprisingly, only the second Family Guy clone covered on this series. This one's a bit different though. This one is right-wing and anti-woke. Wow. Very much similar to The New Norm, which was previously covered twice on this series. As I mentioned before, I'm making a video on this show right now because of recent events, but I'm not gonna lie, I thought that recent events would affect the way that I looked at this show, similar to how it affected The New Norm. The New Norm was funny bad back when there was only one episode in the summer of this year, and then episodes 2 and 3 dropped months later and they weren't funny bad, they were just plain bad. Episode 1 was the only funny bad episode, and then almost immediately after, you know what happened, and so now episode 1 is no longer funny bad in retrospect to me. That brief Elon Musk cameo at the end of episode 1 infuriates me to no end more than it did before thanks to recent events. And so I thought that this show would similarly be affected. If I had looked at this show prior to you know what happening, I would probably find it to be funny bad. I would consider it ironic, whatever. And then because of recent events, I look at this show and I think, wow, this is garbage, I hate it, like it would make me angry. But nothing, I repeat, nothing would prepare me for how boring this show is. The show follows Richard Birchum, a woodwork teacher at a high school, as he tries to adapt to a modern society. This includes having to raise a gamer son, yes, a gamer son, who refuses to go outside and do anything, and instead just stays inside of his room playing video games and live streaming and whatever. It is some of the most how do you do fellow kids crap I've ever seen, except it's supposed to be bad. This is like you fellow kids or something like that, I don't know. In the first episode, when you see Mr. Birchum talking to his son, there's an Angry Birds joke that's made and it's like, this came out in 2024, just a reminder, this came out this year, and so here they are referencing a game that's still very popular in 2024. Yeah, everyone still plays Angry Birds right now in 2024, right? Right? The funniest thing is that in a later episode, they make a Fortnite joke, and so it's like, they know what Fortnite is. The people that made this show, they know what Fortnite is. They know that it's a largely popular game now, and yet they still think that people play Angry Birds in 2024. They are somehow up to date and out of touch at the same time. And then you also have the wife and the daughter. The wife exists. She's a character. She does nothing interesting. There is nothing to say about her. The daughter is the same thing. There is nothing to say about this character either. I guess she acts as sort of like a second voice of reason alongside Mr. Birchum, often siding with whatever opinions he brings up throughout the show. I don't know. The students that attend Mr. Birchum's class refuse to follow his rules, except for one kid who you not has the same voice actor as Johnny Test. I'm not even joking about that. I'm not saying it sounds like Johnny Test. No, it's straight up the same voice actor as Johnny Test. And he's supposed to be the teacher's pet. He's supposed to be the only student that supports Mr. Birchum. Unfortunately, again, he doesn't do anything interesting at all. He's just a boring character. I was hoping there would be at least a little bit of a funny bad novelty with this character. Just the idea of hearing showing Johnny Test complaining about wokeness and pronouns and whatever. No, there's nothing like that, unfortunately. You never get to see that happen. You never get to see Johnny Test complain about how this generation is easily offended, and that saddens me. And finally, you have Elliot, who is supposed to be this school counselor, and basically he's the stereotypical leftist of the show, the punching bag for the show. He is the woke, easily offended snowflake millennial leftist, the one and only in the flesh. An over-the-top stereotype that is unfortunately not over-the-top enough in order to make it funny. And that's something that actually surprised me a bit about this show. I know this is gonna sound extremely weird, but this show isn't as right-wing as I expected it to be. Now, undeniably, it is right-wing. It is anti-woke. There's no denying any of that at all, but that's not really the main focus of the show. Most of the show is just this really fucking boring, generic Family Guy clone. The only thing to make it really stand out from the rest of the crowd is that it can be right-wing and anti-woke on a few occasions. Besides that, though, it's just your average Family Guy clone. Your average, generic, bad adult cartoon. There is no funny bad moments in this show. There aren't even, like, genuinely funny jokes in this show either. Not that I was expecting any, but, you know, sometimes I can be surprised. Sometimes these really bad cartoons can have at least one or two genuinely funny jokes in them. That is not the case here. I don't think I laughed once watching all 6 episodes of this show. I'm supposed to find this show either hilarious if I was right-wing, or offensive if I was a woke snowflake millennial or whatever, and instead I feel neither emotion. I'm bored out of my mind watching this show. It's boring as hell. This just makes me think even further. Why was New Norm episode 1 funny bad? And I think I understand the reason why. Episode 1 of The New Norm was completely over the top with how right-wing it was. Think of every generic criticism that right-wing people can throw out and just put them into an entire episode. Include a stereotype that would never exist in real life. Nobody acts like this in real life. Nobody is like this in real life. And then put in the stupidest implications you could possibly think of, such as this moment right here where it's implied that allergies are woke now, apparently.
I'm allergic to dogs.
It's okay. Billy is an emotional support dog and non-binary.
Oh, okay then. Good dog.
It's so f***ing stupid, but at least that it makes it funny stupid. It's enjoyably garbage. You can laugh at it and make fun of it ironically. Of course, it's gonna be a lot harder to do that now because of recent events, but still, for the time, it was fun. Episodes 2 and 3 of The New Norm and the entirety of Mr. Birchum are so much more tame in comparison. They're not as over the top with its right-wingness as episode 1 of The New Norm is, and so it's just, they're nothing burgers basically. They're not entertainingly bad in the slightest. I will give Mr. Birchum this though, at least I can 100% tell that it was made with serious intentions. We may never truly know if The New Norm is a genuine cartoon or if it was made as a joke. Like, yeah, this is an intentionally bad cartoon. Mr. Birchum, on the other hand, is 100% sincere, I can tell you that much. This is a show that feels like it would be a gold mine of funny bad moments that would be interesting for me to talk about, but no. The few explicitly right-wing moments in the show are basically all the same. There's nothing to say about one moment that you can't say about the other moments. It's all just the same thing. And then you look past the right-wing stuff and it's not even offensively bad, it's just boring as hell. I guess there's a little bit, ever so slight slightly a little bit of a funny bad vibe from the show whenever you see it try and parody like millennial leftists or whatever, Gen Z, stuff like that, and it's like, no one acts like this in real life, no one talks like this in real life. Sometimes there are moments with Mr. Birchum's gamer son where they reference something modern, like there's an episode where the son tries to help out his mom with her job, and he tells her all about this Mr. Beast parody, which, goddamn, that has aged like milk, hasn't it? But it's just so surreal to think that Mr. Beast is being parodied in a right-wing cartoon. To be fair though, considering the fact that this is the same cartoon that thinks people still play Angry Birds in 2024, I'm glad they went with a YouTuber that's relevant nowadays. They could have easily went with Fred or Ray William Johnson or whatever, but no, they went with a YouTuber that's actually relevant nowadays. Even if right now, in the present time, he's relevant for the wrong reasons. In the latter half of the show, there's this character that appears within Mr. Birchum's vision, Burly Man as they call him, who is voiced by Patrick Warburton. I'm not kidding you. Patrick Warburton voices a character in Family Guy and a character in a Family Guy clone. What a time we live in. On a serious note, it does kind of suck the idea that like a legendary voice actor like Patrick Warburton is attached to something like this. I'm basically inhaling copium right now, but I'm hoping he's just in this for the money and that's it. Like he just accepted the role, says his lines, you know, he doesn't even agree with the politics of the show. Burly Man over here is supposed to be a character from a TV dinner that Mr. Birchum used to eat as a kid in the late 60s. Once again, much like Johnny Test, at no point do you ever see this character complain about wokeness or anything like that. You never hear him express any sort of right-wing opinions. Again, though, I feel like that would have added a little bit of a funny bad novelty. It would hurt the idea that like Patrick Warburton believes in this kind of crap, but at the same time, it would be a little bit funny bad to hear him complaining about wokeness and pronouns and whatever. Nah, there's nothing like that again. Oh yeah, and finally you have the school principal, who is voiced by Roseanne Barr. Don't know who Roseanne Barr is? Well, let me explain it to you. She was in some old sitcom in the 90s that ended, and then like they brought it back in 2018, and then they almost immediately canceled it because she said some like really racist stuff about Obama on Twitter, I believe. And so they canceled the show, and then they retooled it to not have her in it, and like this other version of the show without her in it is still going on to this day. And she's in this show now. I'm guessing this is like sort of, she's become like a right-wing icon similar to J.K. Rowling. I have no clue. Apparently, this is actually her first role in basically anything since she was fired from Roseanne and it was cancelled. Further supporting the theory I have that she's become this icon of the right. I don't know. Unfortunately, none of that changes how boring this show is to sit through. I know that I've gone on before about how boring this show is, but it truly is. It's 6 long, painful episodes of some of the most boring comedy I've ever seen. A small part of me actually thinks this show would be better if it was more explicitly right-wing, because at least then there would be a little bit of a funny bad feel to it. At least it would give me something to talk about. At least it would make me feel something. Instead, I just get this extremely boring, dull Family Guy clone with only the occasional right-wing moment sprinkled in. And these are long episodes as well. These episodes are around like 26 to 27 minutes long. These are long episodes, and they have no reason to be. Perhaps the most interesting thing about this show is the fact that the character of Mr. Birchum is actually much older than we think he is. Series creator Adam Carolla actually created the character of Mr. Birchum all the way back in the 90s as part of a local radio station, before later adapting him into this long-running Comedy Central puppet show about prank calls calls. What's probably the most interesting thing about this though is that in 2011 a pilot was made for the show and it was pitched to Fox, which honestly explains a lot. The good news, if you can even call it that, is that the pilot episode is available very easily. The other good news, again, if you can even call it that, is that I've archived the pilot, so if the worst were to happen to it, don't worry, because I have it in my possession. The bad news is, okay, this one's also debatable if it's bad news or not. I don't know if I can show anything from the pilot. I don't know if I could show any screenshots or anything like that from the pilot. So you're just gonna have to take my word for it unless you decide to go and find the pilot yourselves. And the other bad news, and this is the only one where it's like, yeah, this is definitively bad news, is that the pilot is just as bad as the final show. Well, okay, it's slightly less bad than the final cartoon, but it's still bad. It still retains that very boomer feel that the final show has. It's not right-wing, I don't think it is, but it does have this like out-of-touch boomer feel to it. Kids these days, you know, stuff like that. What's probably the strangest thing though is that instead of ripping off Family Guy, the pilot resembles more King of the Hill. The art style resembles King of the Hill a lot more. Just the overall tone of the pilot it feels more akin to King of the Hill than Family Guy. Again, I'm not sure if I can show any images from the pilot in this video, but instead of the gamer son we have in the final cartoon, we have an emo son of sorts. That's the only member of the family that's different. Everyone else is mostly the same, I suppose. There isn't really much of a plot, which I guess is to be expected from a pitch pilot, but the main thing that I focus on is how much it resembles King of the Hill. It's still unfunny, the pilot, but it's just interesting to me the fact that like it feels more like King of the Hill than Family Guy. Maybe I consider it slightly less bad than the final cartoon just because of that fact, you know? You don't really get to see a lot of King of the Hill ripoffs compared to Family Guy ripoffs. The only King of the Hill ripoff that I know of, and it's technically not even a King of the Hill ripoff as it's from Mike Judge himself. If this show was actually greenlit by Fox and it aired in 2011 or 2012, for sure it wouldn't have lasted long. The character of Mr. Birchum is still just as unlikable in this pitch pilot as he is in the final show, even without the right-wing stuff. It's Alan Gregory for boomers. That's probably the best way to describe this pitch pilot. If Fox had actually greenlit this show all the way back in 2011 or 2012, then maybe we could have gotten 3 consecutive Fox flops instead of 2. Somewhere out there in an alternate universe, I would be making a video going over this weird, forgotten King of the Hill ripoff. I'd probably be frequently comparing this show to Alan Gregory, because of the unlikable nature of their main characters. The only difference is that Alan Gregory had the potential to be good, whereas Mr. Birchum, this alternate universe Fox version of Mr. Birchum, I mean, a good version of it already exists. In a way, it kind of would have been funny if this show did premiere on Fox, considering the fact that King of the Hill originally ran from 1997 to 2010, and then this would have ran around 2011 or 2012, so it's like, King of the Hill dies, and in its place we get this, like, crappy rip-off version. Make no mistake, this pilot episode is garbage, but it's less bad than the final show, and that might just be because of the fact that number 1, it's not right-wing, not explicitly, and number 2, this is the main reason, it resembles King of the Hill more than Family Guy, and I'm not one of those people that thinks like Family Guy is bad or whatever, but it does feel refreshing to watch something that rips off a different adult cartoon instead of Family Guy. It's a damn shame they decided not to carry that on over to the final show, instead choosing to rip off Family Guy again just because that's what everyone else wants to do when it comes to making a cheap adult cartoon. And unfortunately, adding a right-wing twist to the show is not enough to make it stand out from the crowd. This is one of the most boring cartoons I've ever had the misfortune of sitting through. I didn't know what to expect from this show, especially after recent events unfolded. I didn't know if I would find this show funny bad, or if I would find it offensively bad, or if I would find it especially offensively bad after recent events. But I feel nothing. I feel bored as hell watching this. Like I just wasted my time watching this whole thing. There's no funny bad moments in this show. There's not even like genuinely funny moments. Again, I wasn't expecting any, but still. It's just garbage is what it is. I might change the ranking for this show at some point in the future, but for the time being, I'm putting this in between Has-Been Hotel and High Guardian Spice, which is probably the harshest place that I could put this show on the ranking list. I could put this show at the very bottom of the ranking list and it would be less harsh of a placement. That should tell you a lot right there. It's a little bit less bad than the new norm, I guess. I don't know. It's better than episodes 2 and 3 of the new norm, but it's worse than episode 1. Regardless, both shows are incredibly unfunny and not worth your time, and because of recent events, they're only going to become even more insufferable. I went from being ironically excited for more new norm episodes to completely dreading whenever we get a new norm episode. Mr. Birchum, on the other hand, I feel nothing but dread for when we get season 2, if we do get a season 2. Y'all were making a big deal about Velma season 2 earlier this year. Get ready, we're about to get even worse garbage than that. I'm not going to make any future videos on these two shows. I think I've said everything that I ever wanted to say about them, and it is going to be impossible to talk about both of these shows without going into detail about recent events. In general, I kind of am getting tired of looking at political stuff. I want to look at stuff that's like fun to talk about why it's bad. I understand that politics are important and that we shouldn't 100% ignore them, but I'm getting tired of talking about like bad political cartoons. You know, the new norm, Lil Bush, our cartoon president. It's getting old for me. I'm getting tired. I want something that's fun to talk about again. I want another Nut Shack, okay? That's what I want. I want another Control Alt Delete. Hammerman was a f***ing breath of fresh air. I want more stuff like that. Please. Please. Whatever I look at next will probably, hopefully be funny bad, but who knows what the future has in store for me. Birchum Bros and Normies, I'm sorry, but they've both let us down. They both let us down big time. Anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I will see you all next time. Adios.